Good evening.
Good evening.
That good evening, as you know, is just to let those who hear these tapes know that I wasn't talking to myself. I really had an audience. And that inspires them. You know, when you hear these tapes, you will be reliving your experience here. You'll never hear these tapes without being right back in this room physically, and right back seeing sights in Hawaii physically. And fortunately, your memories are happy ones, joyous ones, and that means you have stored up for you a lot of happiness in remembering. But in the same way, there are those who are not present here, but who have been present at other classes just like this. And as they hear these tapes, they too will relive their experiences in class and the many exciting experiences we've had in California, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Louisville, New York, Detroit, and the other side of the globe. And so it is that these tapes have more than one purpose. It is not only the message itself, and certainly the message in and of itself is valuable, and not only the fact that everything on these tapes gets on there as it is spoken, with no editing, no changing, no rehearsal, no recitation, just a spontaneous live message as it comes through, and as it's played back, it lives again, the same life that it has in going out of my lips. And then it has the further value of bringing back into consciousness the experience that you had in receiving it. And so I'm always happy for the things that get on the tape, aside from the message itself, that makes these messages as valuable as they are, these tapes rather, as valuable as they are. I have even had wonderful letters from people saying that the familiar rattling of the garbage cans brought back happy memories. Some of you know what that meant. For many and many a class have we sat and listened to as the garbage men took the garbage out of the hotels. And other noises, including revelings at Roosevelt Hotel in New York, weddings next door, drinking parties. Oh, we have everything on our tapes. Now, in our class last week and in this, I have given you, or I have been the instrument through which is given you about all the material that I can give you at the present time. I mean by that, last week you received a new principle with which to work. A principle that I have watched in work. Very honestly, I believe that that principle is the one ultimately that is going to be found to be the one that will solve every riddle there is on earth. I am convinced that when I was caused to meditate on this idea of power and saw that back through the ages the world has come forward with two powers. Always one power overcoming, destroying, replacing another power. And that I was ultimately caused to see that the whole secret of life is two powers, which has resulted in such sayings as survival of the fittest, self-preservation is the first law of nature, the use of force in war, the use of force in dealing with crime, the use of force in almost every activity of human existence. And yet, as you study the history of the world, you find this, that the same evils are on earth today that were on earth in the beginning of time. There's just a different power or more power used in promoting them or overcoming them. But the ages have not eliminated the powers. It was in meditation, in pondering this, that the question came in my mind, does that mean that our search is for still another power to do something to these other powers? Is it possible that there is a spiritual power which is going to destroy material power and supplant it? And if so, is there any possibility that if that happens, that there may not be some evils develop in the spiritual power, so that we'll have to find still another power to overcome the spiritual power? What is this limit? Where does it stop? Bows and arrows? Rifles, machine guns, bombs? And then when you get all caught up with those, say, no, now we have to start with prayer and use that for a power. Well, we've already seen how prayer is used for evil purposes. I'm sure that many of you must know that prayer is used for evil powers and evil purposes. In the first place, all of the primitive teachings that used the power of prayer to heal also used the power of prayer to kill. We have that here in Hawaii in what is called the Kahuna system. There is the good Kahuna and there is the bad Kahuna. And the good Kahuna can heal you and save your life, but you can go to the bad Kahuna and he'll pray you to death. In the same way, the aborigines of Australia have a method of praying for purification and health. But they also pray your death. And they use a mental force, a mental power. They sometimes use a piece of wood, a piece of stone, a piece of bone, sometimes just point the finger. And with the power of thought behind it, they kill. In South America, in the older primitive tribes, there was a power of good. There was also the same power of mental assassination. And as a matter of fact, very recently, a new tribe was discovered. I mean, an old tribe was recently discovered using the same type of drug that is being recommended in the States for reaching God or resting from troubles. They've always had those drugs. The power of prayer can be used two ways. It's a double-edged sword. As we came into a greater understanding of mental powers, it was discovered that a person who can use the power of thought to heal can use the power of thought for ill. The same person can use the power two ways. When Mrs. Eddy taught mental healing through the power of thought, she didn't know that the thought could be used two ways because there was no evil in her own makeup. But after she taught the power of healing by mental means, she discovered some of her students using that power for evil purposes. And so she added a chapter to her book, which is no longer in the later editions, but which is to be found in the earlier editions, in which she pointed out those very sins of her early students and named some of them, and showed how they could use mental power for evil purposes as well as for good purposes. And she warned against it. As a matter of fact, there is a statement in one of her books which says that the day will come when the thief will not have to enter your home. He can sit in his own home and make you bring your possessions to him. And that day is here. And that power is being used by certain organizations in the world today, and it causes a lot of people to bring their wealth to it and deposit it there and leave it there. Again, in one of her lesser writings, Mrs. Eddy says, the same mind that can do good can do evil. So you see that as you can use the forces of matter for good or for evil, as you can use electricity for good or for evil, you can cure with it and you can kill with it. So we know today that the power of the human mind can be used for good and it can be used for evil. Fortunately, there are more good people in the world, or there'd be more mischief mentally done. Or it may be that there are not enough people mentally, or there are too many mentally lazy to practice it. That may be our salvation. Because it is true that wherever you have power, you have the possibility and the potentiality of good power and of evil power. Now, could it be, and I'm always telling you that this is part of that meditation that led to this, is it possible that in a God-ordained world, that a God power can be used for good and for evil? And that quickly answered itself, no. No, if you ever find what God power is, you will find that it has no opposite and no opposition. You will find that it cannot be used for good and it cannot be used for evil. It can only remain the creative, maintaining, and sustaining power of good, but you can't use it. It can use you. It can establish its law and order, but you can't use it for good and you can't use it for evil, and that is the power the world awaits. That which will forever prove to be no power, a power that no one can use, a power that only God itself can express, activate, motivate. That's what I'm looking for. That is my dream, because it is so clear to me that as long as there are two powers, there will be people to use them for good and others to use them for evil. And since most people of the human persuasion will do nothing for themselves, it's natural that the evil power will predominate. Now, as long as this world goes on without embracing God, there will be these two powers. And sometimes we will have periods of peace and sometimes war. Sometimes we will have prosperity and sometimes panic. And the ultimate it always must be that every experience ends in wreck and ruin, as all previous civilizations have ended in wreck and ruin, if it is left to two powers. Scripture says he will overturn and overturn and overturn until he come whose right it is. Now, in the days of material force, there was only a good material force and an evil material force. Then came the mental era, and for a short while it was a good era, a healing era. Even the man who's most responsible for its origin, Anton Mesmer, thought of it only in terms of healing. Not spiritual healing, but mesmeric healing. But he thought of it in terms of good. And certainly there is no record that Mr. Quimby ever used it for any purpose but good. And surely we know that no greater blessing has come to mankind than what came through Mrs. Eddy in her use, first of mental powers and then spiritual. But it wasn't long until evil powers came in with mental powers. It wasn't long until it was discovered that if you can use a power for good, you can use it for evil. And from that day to this, we have been having good mental power goodly used, mental power evilly used. Today, the world is a world of material force and of mental force. A world that is partly good, partly evil. With the principle that was introduced in this class last week, we had the introduction of God realization operating without one power overcoming another, without good over evil, truth over error, immortal over mortal. And we learned how we individually develop the state of consciousness that lives without power, demonstrates without power, and finally brings our particular worlds into that orbit. It all begins with understanding that neither good nor evil is power. It begins with the understanding that nothing that exists is imbued with the power of good or of evil. Nothing. Nothing. You may say that a germ carries disease, but almost every metaphysician has been able to stop infectious and contagious disease quickly through the realization that there is no power of evil in a germ. Many have brought about healings of alcoholism through the understanding that there is no power of evil in alcohol. I've had better success in the realization that there's no power of good in alcohol, because it has been my experience that most people who suffer from alcohol aren't suffering from the belief that it's evil. They wouldn't touch it if they knew it was evil. It's from the belief that they're going to get good from it. And in the realization that it isn't good, the taste is lost. Had a very interesting case of that in Los Angeles, where a woman came to me, and her husband by that time was spending all week in bed except the Friday when he went out to buy his supply of whiskey with her money. And she was just about at the point of being fed up with it when she came to me for help. And it was just a matter of inspiration that said through me, you wouldn't mind your husband buying whiskey if it wasn't harmful, would you? Oh, no. Buy him all the Coca-Cola he wants or anything else. Well, but isn't our teaching that it isn't evil? Yes, but it doesn't seem so. I know that's the appearances again. But now, let us see whether it's your husband who's at fault in this or whether it's you and I. Supposing we agree that for the next week he can have all the whiskey he wants because we know that it has no power of good and it has no power of evil, and so we don't care what he does with it. Oh, that shocked her for a little while. But she finally saw it as an experiment. And I want you to know that within 2 weeks that he said to her, there's no use drinking whiskey anymore. They're making that old wartime weak stuff. It has no power. I have seen for a long time that we imbue things with the power of good and the power of evil. But it was only last March that I saw that the entire reason that we are on the outside of Eden is because we do not see that there is no power of good and evil because there is no power. Nothing is power, and nobody is power. God alone is a creative, maintaining and sustaining power which operates without any help from us. Nor does God imbue us with God's power, nor does God imbue anything with God's power. We have no God power. God alone is power, and we are just instruments through which or as which it flows. But God is the power. The Master saw that clearly when he said, why callest thou me good? I can of my own self do nothing. It was the Father. So it is with us. Power isn't really given to us. But if we come to a state of mind in which we are so cradled that we do not resist the seeming error, do not refute it, deny it, try to fight it, overcome it, or destroy it, but take the attitude, there is no power. There can't be a power. In a God-created universe, there can't be a power. I've just witnessed some wonderful things. You will too, and I'd rather that you would have your own experience in not refuting, not building a mental wall and trying to push that away because you think it's evil, or someone has said it's evil, or we have accepted it as evil. Build a consciousness for yourself in which any problem that's presented to you, you can sit down and say, now look, here it is in my mind. I'm looking at it. It isn't doing anything to me. It isn't benefiting me, isn't hurting me. It's a shadow. It's not a power. I know. The world has said that this thing is a power. It can kill. It can destroy. It can weaken. But I say it's a shadow, that in a God-created world, it isn't a power, and you don't need any powers. I don't even need a power to destroy it, or overcome it, or remove it, let it alone. In a God universe, the only secret of life is no power. And you'll watch the great miracle that when you come to the place of no power can operate against you, in you, or through you. All of human existence is based on two powers, and even religion is based on the power of God over evil. But in heaven, there are no powers of good or of evil. There is only God itself living its own life as you, as me, as a heavenly universe, and the very moment you can demonstrate the Master, resist not evil, you will have found the secret of life. Otherwise, the rest of your days you're going to be chasing a power, looking for a power, searching for a power, begging for a power to do something. But remember this, so is the rest of the world. You're just in competition with everybody else in the world. And the chances are that the evil power will end up overcoming the good as it has in the past. But in a universe that finds a new principle, not a new power, a new principle, a new dimension of life, you're going to live in a world in which there is no competition. There'll be other people in the same line of business, but they won't be competing. You'll all be living, you'll all be prospering. You'll be living in a universe of men who do not fight each other. You know, up until, well, almost the present day, and in some cases right at the present, the only way of settling labor troubles has been either for a firm to lock out its employees or a firm to go on strike, or the employees to go on strike. Force, one using force against the other. Now, here and there are firms commencing to realize you don't need force. You just sit down and you talk and you don't use force at all. And they're getting along very, very well. I know this as sure as I know that God made little apples. That we are only going to know peace when we don't war with each other, when we don't think of using a power against each other, over each other, for some reason. When we can sit in a world like this, there's no power being used here. Nobody forced anybody here. Nobody compelled anybody to come here. Nobody is saying a word. Nobody is using any kind of a power in this whole thing. Each one in this room is free to come, to go, to use what they learn or to leave it alone. Each one is free. No coercion, no force, not even mental power. Watch your own world as you bring yourself inwardly to the feeling that you do not want to oppose anybody or anything, or use a power against them. Resist not evil. It may be at first that somebody will want to come and take your wallet, and you may have to say, go ahead and take it, in order to prove that even though they take it, you don't lose anything. Because it does happen that way. It really happens that way. They can take your wallet. They can take every last dime you have in the world. But they can't deprive you of $1. Because faster than they can spend it, you will have made it all over again or received it in some other way, so that it will not be long until you'll have as much as you had before and probably 12 baskets full left over. Whereas if you fought and struggled to hold on to it, you may find yourself with less if it's only attorney's fees. You see, it is we who believe in holding on to form. Nature doesn't. It creates fruit, vegetables, flowers, and then lets them unfold and go their way and then recreates and recreates. It's always the same life. There's no death of a flower. It's the same life in the next one as was in the last one. It's only the form that goes its way. It is just the same as you do with your fingernails, your hair, the same thing as is happening to your skin as it sloughs off. You don't die. You don't care what they do with your hair. You don't care what they do with your toenails or your fingernails. You don't care what becomes of the skin that sloughs off, because it doesn't affect you. You still live. There is something called an I that lives no matter what they do to this body. And so it is you're going to find that money isn't substance, I is substance, and it makes no difference what happens to your money. As fast as you can spend it, I create and recreate. And it appears over and over again. Our wars and our lawsuits are all built on the fact that we have to hold on to something at any price, even if we arouse envies and jealousies and hatreds and wars. But there's a spiritual law, and it doesn't come into operation in the physical world or mental world. It only comes into operation when you touch the spiritual world, the world of no power. And then you find that no matter how much of matter disappears from you, it's rebirthed. If you destroy this temple in 3 days, I will raise it up again. Now, physically holding on or mentally holding on is the same thing. Physically resisting with a fist or the sword, or mentally resisting with affirmations and denials, it's the same thing. We, in the infinite way, have got to bring a new dimension on this earth, and that is rising above the physical and the mental into the spiritual. Now, in the spiritual, there is no power. There's no good over evil, and you meet every situation by resting in the spirit. I can't describe what takes place. I can only tell you how it takes place. You, yourself, have to experience it. I can't tell you what God is. I can't tell you what Christ is. I've experienced it face to face. I live it over and over and over again. I can't tell it. In the same way, I cannot tell you what happens. I can only tell you how it happens. That if there is no resistance, no reaction, it's just as if you were to drop a few drops of water on this floor. Nobody around here will put up a physical fight about it or a mental fight about it, because the few drops of water are completely nothing so far as the floor is concerned. So it is, when you begin to perceive that you must live above powers, you'll be living in the kingdom of heaven, or what is called the Garden of Eden. We believe very often that we're engaged in spiritual healing or spiritual living or even spiritual knowledge when we never penetrate any further than some level of the mind. And yet, because it's different than the conscious realm of mind, thinking mind, we think we've touched spirit or God. We haven't at all. We've just touched another level of mind. You never penetrate beyond the level of mind until you are in an atmosphere where there is no power. That and that alone is God. That and that alone is spirit. As long as you are in a realm where there are two powers, you're in some measure of mind. Now that is why there are so few mystics in the world, because there are so few who have been able to penetrate beyond mind. only the mystic, only the one who has attained conscious union perceives that which is beyond all mental levels or power levels and witnesses the reality. But even mystics only attain it on occasional experiences. None really live in it continuously. There is always a coming down to earth and a meeting with powers. But what concerns us this moment is this. If, as we thought a few years ago in discovering the atomic bomb, that we had the secret of peace because we had such terrific power that nobody would ever want it used against them, we didn't have our peace very long because somebody else found the same power and then made a greater one. Now to threaten the world, you have to have something greater than hydrogen power. I say to you that if you discover a mental power that heals disease, somebody will discover a mental power that causes disease. And if not disease, lack or limitation or other forms of trouble. For every bit of good mental power we can bring to bear, somebody in this world is going to discover how to use a bad mental power. And before you know it, it will be like all of these primitive people, their powers both for good and evil are outlawed, just as they are here. Kahunas cannot legally even heal. And the reason is that who knows where to stop a mental power? How can you say, well, you can only use it for good? Well, who's to determine what good is? Since some people believe getting rid of their enemy is good. As a matter of fact, it's a common belief in this world. That's why we have wars. When we can't get rid of them any other way, we just go out and shoot them. So who is to say what is good and what is evil? No, no. Every power of good in the physical and mental realm will be met with a power of evil, and the ultimate solution is our ability to demonstrate a realm, a dimension of life in which there is no power that we can use. Then we're in God's power, which is not good power. It's creative, maintaining, and sustaining power, because good is only when you commence to have comparisons. In order to have good, you must have some evil to compare it with. But in God, there's nothing to compare with, so there's neither good nor evil, only spirit or God. Well, that brings us to this place. I've given you that principle. There's nothing more I can do about it. It's in last week's class. Now you have it in this week's class. You'll have the tapes. Eventually you'll have a book. It is what you do with it that determines its event in your life. Whether it's just a passing thing that you heard in a class, or whether it's something that you're ultimately able to demonstrate, that's for you. I'm sure of this, that in the acute problems that may come to your experience that you cannot yet meet, that there are enough of us now in this work who have been working with it, that we can help you and even demonstrate for you. That's far from solving your life's problems. You yourself determine to what extent this comes into your life as an experience But the importance of it isn't what it does for you. The importance is whether or not you can prove it to be true. That's the importance. Because if you can prove it to be true, we have then got a principle that can operate universally. That's its importance, not what it does for you or me. Never is a principle important to those who are out in the field teaching it, healing with it, for this reason. They wouldn't be out there unless they'd already lost their lives, unless they had no further interest in whether they themselves were rich or poor, or happy or unhappy, or sick or well to any great extent. You don't get out into this work until you've gone beyond the desire to promote yourself or to benefit yourself. And that is why in this work you may be dragging your feet many, many times and blessing all those around you, for the simple reason you've left yourself out of the picture. So it isn't you that counts, it isn't I that counts, it's whether or not we can develop and promote a principle that, through benefiting others around us, ultimately is going to be the world's salvation. We are only important in the early stages when we're proving it. Having proven it, then we forget ourselves. Then the world calls, and that is when you answer. Now, out of these two classes has come that. Out of these two classes has come these tapes, which will make all of this clear and help in the practice and the living of it. In this class, we have had a step that has never before been presented to a class. And the reason is that it's a difficult subject, very difficult, to give until people are ready for it. That was our chapter 58 of Isaiah. Ordinarily, if you say to people who haven't a background of this work, people who may not know the integrity of the work, if you say to them, look, prayer isn't just sitting down thinking some thoughts, saying some words. It's an action which you must perform. You have got to get up and begin to clothe your naked brother and feed your hungry brother or sister, help in the activity of this world. It's very easily misunderstood. If you say to people, look, I know the spiritual principle, and if they're not grounded, you can do them harm by telling them what it is, because they'll misunderstand and say, that I'm not interested in. And for the time being, you've cheated them. We here know, only because of the years, that the spiritual principle of life is giving. We know that if a tree doesn't give up its fruit, it won't grow more fruit. We know that if a plant doesn't give up its flowers, it can't grow more flowers. It's choked. We know that our whole being is an infinity because God constitutes us. And if we were to sit here and wait for good to come to us, we'd sit endlessly and it wouldn't come. It is when we begin, even to the extent of knowing the truth for our neighbor, our relative, not waiting to be asked, merely to refute, or probably refute now would be a wrong word, but realize the truth as against the appearance. Even in that, we are called upon, with every appearance of discord, lack, limitation that comes before our gaze, even if it comes over the radio or in the newspaper, we have to do something within, and that doing something is giving. Because if nothing else, you've got to stop doing whatever you're doing to give that truth, to know that truth. You've got to even sacrifice whatever thought you're having for somebody else to get busy with that. You're giving of yourself every time you know the truth. So it is. Each one of us has learned that when we give in some form of activity, whether it's benevolence, whether it's our own healing work, whether it's our own teaching work, whether it's typing manuscripts for somebody else's benefit, whatever it may be, it's in the proportion of our willingness to let a flow go out from us that our own good comes back to us. We know that. This class, I have made that as clear as the English language permits, and I haven't before. I haven't before because I waited for our students to demonstrate it. I waited for them to know that I'm not saying it because I want anything of them. I surely don't. I'm saying it now because there is no other way of your making further progress if you are still of those who think that there's some kind of a God somewhere just waiting for you to say, please give me, and is going to give me. Or that you're going to find somebody with the right combination of words that will do it for you. Now you know, as plain as I know how to make it, that prayer is action. Prayer is living. Prayer is stretching forth your hand if you can't do anything else. Prayer is knowing the truth and then doing something, acting on it. Prayer is a letting out from the center within. I can't quote anything finer in that regard than Browning. Truth is within ourselves. It won't come to you by opening a way for it to come in. You've got to open a way for it to go out. Infinity is the measure of your being. Infinity is the capacity of your being. You may only be able to prove it in one sentence or one deed or one action. You may only be able to prove it in helping with a simple headache. But every proof of it strengthens us further for the next thing. If only we can heal that simple headache, it will lead very, very quickly to the next one and the next one and the next one, and we become so strengthened by our own successes that the time comes when we're not interested in the name of the claim or how horrible it sounds to the human world, because we recognize now that we're dealing with a shadow. So you see, this class has covered that. The very first reel of this week's lesson, that's the second class. I meant the very first reel of this class, this week's class, has an exposition of every one of the major principles of the infinite way. There isn't anybody who can study that tape that will not be able to answer any and all questions pertaining to the infinite way. What makes it the infinite way, why it isn't Christian Science or unity or New Thought, why it is specifically and definitely the infinite way, what is it that constitutes the infinite way, it's right there. Anyone who really takes that reel and makes it their own will and should be able at least to answer anyone's question, whether it is someone seeking information about the infinite way or whether it is someone you're teaching and instructing in the infinite way. Then another thing I have revealed to you in this class is everything that you will need for the demonstration of healing, attaining the healing consciousness, treatment on any subject, whether it's physical, mental, moral, or financial, I have embodied, or rather has been embodied, in our monthly letters from June through October of this year. There isn't anybody in the world that has a desire to heal or to be healed that it can't accomplish either one of those things if they will make a diligent enough study of June through October letters. I don't say out November or December because they haven't yet, they may carry it on still. Wait till I see them. But this I know. Take June through October and make a sufficient study of them, and they will develop the consciousness necessary for healing work. And it makes no difference whether the problems brought to you are physical, mental, moral, financial, or human relationships. It's there. Now, you know, that's a lot to come out of just 2 week classes. It's an awful lot. When you get to studying it, you'll see how much it is. And you'll see another one of our principles, that the only reason it's possible is because of the depth and degree of your consciousness. In other words, you can't present college principles to a grammar school child. And so it is that you couldn't take what has been given in these brief sessions unless your own consciousness had been prepared for it by your years of study and time, but more especially your hours of study, your weeks of study as they come up. It isn't how many years you're in the infinite way. It isn't how many years since you discovered the infinite way. It's how many hours per day of those years that you've put in, not only in study, but remember, I make no claim that anyone can study this infinite way and demonstrate it. It isn't study that demonstrates it, it's practice. The study is only the preliminary for the practice. And so it is that I've heard people say, I've read these books for years and I can't do anything with them. I don't doubt that. I think it was in either Metaphysical Notes or Consciousness Unfolding that I said to the class that the whole secret of the infinite way was in one chapter, The New Horizon, in the book The Infinite Way. And that if that chapter were known, nobody would ever need to know anything else. The lady came to me a few weeks later and said that she's memorized it and nothing happened. And I don't doubt that. Because, you see, the mental level isn't the level of demonstration. The intellectual level isn't the level of demonstration. True, it isn't something we want to get rid of. We're not anxious to get rid of our mind. We're certainly not going to do away with intellect. But we must understand them to be instruments which we use to get through to the soul, to the spirit, to the consciousness. Then when we understand that, we will use the mind, we'll use the intellect, we'll absorb these things and practice them, and then ultimately break through this level of the mind and touch the soul. In answering a letter today, this came. The mental level, like psychology, says that each person is a being with qualities, characteristics, and quantities of his own. But spiritual wisdom, and this can only come through spiritual discernment, reveals that only God is the qualities, the capacities, the activities of individual being. And therefore, we do not approach life through the mental level of trying to change the thoughts and characteristics of an individual, but through our realization or spiritual discernment of God as constituting individual being, the so-called healing takes place without any mental manipulation. I think that we had better call our little rest for refreshment, huh?